It has to be said at the very outset that any action taken here to reduce the damage caused by alcohol will find favour with me. I will support this. The question really is going to be, are we going far enough? Are we managing the real problem, or are we simply putting a plaster on a symptom? Now, having been out of the Parliament for the first part of this debate on urgent parliamentary business, I may have missed some salient points from my colleagues in this chamber, but none of you will be surprised to know that I have actually personal experience at the clinical side in remote and rural communities. And so the words I say are actually tinged with practical knowledge of some of the difficulties on the ground. Not all of the difficulties. I cannot, as my honourable colleague Wilson Tucker pointed out, the complexities here are quite huge, and anyone who claims they understand it all is obviously not experienced enough. But if you look at the very fundamental problem with alcohol, it is, as a substance, ethanol, it is actually, or ethyl alcohol, it is toxic. In every shape, every form, every dose. It is toxic. It is tolerable in the human metabolism to a certain extent, but when I'm discussing with my patients, wherever I am, or whichever clinic I happen to find myself, I'm always saying it's the third drink that gets you into trouble. Your first drink is fine. Your second is probably enough. You shouldn't be driving with anything more in your system. By the third drink, that's when things happen. And sometimes they can be funny, laughable. Sometimes they can be catastrophic. We always get, with alcohol, a measure of central nervous system damage. It's a central nervous system suppressant. And any one of us will have experienced that. And have enough alcohol, and your protective measures are going to be reduced so much that you're then going to be doing things that in a sober state of mind you wouldn't have wanted to do. And if your existence is predicated upon the fact that you are continually under the influence of alcohol to some degree or other, then you're never going to actually experience a normal response to conditions. Now, imagine if you have grown up in an area where you are one of the majority, having suffered major trauma in childhood, managing transcultural trauma, intergenerational trauma, and you have the central nervous system suppression, alcohol will always make things worse. Always. And it strikes me as rather strange that such a toxic substance as we have circulating freely in our community is being debated. How can we mitigate some of the problems in some of the areas for some of the people? When we really ought to be asking, how is this benefiting all of us? For example, I could then point out the dangers of taking alcohol while pregnant. Even a glass of wine during pregnancy is associated with a certain risk of fetal damage. Now, it has to be pointed out that my mother was of a generation where alcohol and tobacco was fairly normal during pregnancy. I'm a baby boomer. One might, in this chamber, criticise me for having suffered at that, quite rightly so too. But it hasn't done me too much damage. But when you look at the larger picture of what happens in society when alcohol is consumed during pregnancy, you do get damage. The larger the amount you take, the more the damage. And another interesting fact with alcohol is it's actually carcinogenic. So we're having an increased risk of cancer, even with small amounts of alcohol. Are we really debating the right debate? Now, the answer is yes and no. Yes, we need to do something now. But no, we ought to look at this much further, much closer, because we have, in Australia, 6,500 annual deaths due to alcohol alone. I'm not sure if that includes also the road toll deaths where alcohol has played a significant role. I haven't got those figures. I should maybe check them. It might be worthwhile having a look-see. But certainly, of those 3,500 annual road deaths, we might be asking how many of those had alcohol in their system, how many had other drugs in their system. So it might be that we've got 9,000 annual deaths due to alcohol. I don't know. It's certainly a large number, and we ought to be taking note of this in all areas of society. Now, moving on, when I look at alcohol and the role it plays in the remote and rural communities where I have worked, I can absolutely say that that is one of the biggest problems that we face in such societies. Not from everyone, it must be said, but for those for whom alcohol is a problem, the problems that are caused are inordinately greater than the numbers who have the problem. Now, I could testify to that from any night in emergency departments in any hospital in remote and rural Australia. The people coming in who are, first of all, just drunk. The second, those who are coming in drunk and aggressive. Thirdly, those who are drunk and aggressive and have injured themselves or others. Then we have the problems of the chronic ill health due to alcohol. I remember vividly sitting with a patient in the emergency department in Newman Hospital, and after 30 years of doing everything wrong, including taking alcohol in large amounts, his health was at an end. I remember him sitting there on his gurney, looking at me in the eyes and saying, "Doc," he said, "Doc, help me, help me." And there's nothing I could do, because had he listened 25 years ago, we could have done something. But now, nothing could be done. I vividly recall another patient who had liver failure. I mean, it's really quite fun when you're a doctor dealing with this, because when they get the esophageal varices and they burst, the blood volume being expelled by vomit, and indeed through the gut, is huge. You have to put a tube down and blow up a balloon that side of the stomach and a balloon this side of the esophagus and pull it up so you can actually stop the bleeding. It is a messy procedure, and will save a life for a while, until the next time. If you have to say here, if you are a doctor and you are involved in an emergency department, these things do actually make a lot of fun. You talk about them over a cup of coffee with your mates. But for the patients involved, it's really life or death. So this patient here, we managed to successfully bring him back from the brink of liver failure. And we'd set up a liver transplant for him, only for him then to go back on the alcohol and die of the consequences. Now, these are the headline-grabbing, the beautiful, fun things to do as doctors. But what it doesn't look at is the depth of social disturbance throughout all of society. And I'll maybe underline this by looking at a family where alcohol is in the game, perhaps both mother and father there, where you're then getting battles, you're getting fights when you're alcoholized. And the children are absorbing this, and they're in fear for the life of the mother or the safety of the father, who is now again unconscious. And over not just a month, but years, maybe a decade, the children are growing up with this in front of them. Are they, once they've come out of that society, out of that situation, are they going to have a happy and healthy adult life? It will be hard. Will it mark them for life? It will. Will some of them succumb to that? Yes. Will some grow above that and outgrow this and become wonderful paragons of society? Yes. But it is a burden on society in all areas of society. It doesn't matter if you're in Nukumba or if you're in Nedlands. The same problems are there, just to different degrees. And the end result is human suffering. Human suffering that is avoidable if we were to take measures to curb the use of alcohol at all levels. So the idea of a banned drinkers register is a fine idea. The implication of that is that we need to employ that and to try and find ways of stopping people getting around it. It's very much like the prohibition in the US, when, while alcohol was banned, it was absolutely available. You just encouraged the criminals to engage in that activity. And the problems occurred. Even, I recall also from the time back in the 1960s in Australia, when bars closed at 6 in the afternoon. And what happened? People rocked up from work, downed as many schooners as they could, went home drunk, and the next day did the same thing again, because alcohol was limited, rather than actually being able to drink in a civil manner. Now, let's define civil manner, of course. It's a bit difficult. But in a civil manner where that drunkenness actually reduced. We need to think, I think, outside the box. This is in-the-box thinking, this legislation. And I approve of it, but it is still in-the-box thinking. And we need an out-the-box solution. Now, I'll give you an example here. You know where I'm going to go with this. In Portugal, when they decriminalised all drugs, including the ones I detest with a passion, alcoholism reduced. I wouldn't have thought that possible, but that was the case. And it seems to be the case that when access to all drugs is decriminalised, I wouldn't say legalised, decriminalised, then the need to get smashed on alcohol seems to go down. You have other ways of managing yourself, but also, if it is now decriminalised, we can now get the services involved to help people recover from what are obviously physical or mental problems which require them to use drugs and alcohol in an aberrant fashion. Mental health. Managing mental health would be a fantastic area to work in. Rather than banning drinkers, let's get the mental health services in there and give the social circumstances which are needed to smooth out the problems which are there, which then result in people having mental health problems and then needing alcohol to manage the nerves, which then leads into a very nasty downward spiral into destruction, certainly, and early death, probably. Now, I could go on for a long time. I think anyone who's involved in this sphere will be pointing out that from a medical point of view, what is going on with the abuse of a commonly used drug. And I think we all know it. So I'm not going to labour the point. What I would be saying is that if we're going to pass this bill, and it will have my support, although I'm certainly going to be asking questions in the committee stage, the practicalities of it, the question then is going to be, is this really all we can do? Is there not more we should be doing? Should we not be thinking outside the box? And here, I would ask both sides of Parliament to take this, move on, and let's have an open series of questions among ourselves. Are we really serving those in need with this law alone, or should we be looking at an out-of-the-box solution that covers the true underlying causes of the problem and manages that, rather than putting a plaster on a symptom? Well-meaning though it is, well-intended though it is, will it achieve what we want to achieve, or will we simply encourage people to bypass in ways we haven't yet thought of? So with these few words, I'll say I will support this bill and look forward to seeing the further details.